we are continuing through First and Second Samuel. We've been we've been going through this, and we kind of saw the rise of Saul, and we're kind of seeing his fall now as he kind of falls kind of into disgrace. This last week we talked about him continuing to do things that he shouldn't do, where he was he got a medium and he called Samuel up from the grave, and there was a lot of discussion about that, where what does it mean? How do we understand? Was it actually Samuel? Was it demons or evil workings and all that stuff? Hi, Ann. Come on in. We saved a seat for you. Yeah, you're fine. You can either do here or you can sit over by Sue. You can do whichever one. So we have Samuel, and so Samuel comes back, and the thing that no matter what Samuel is, Samuel from the grave is very much on brand for Samuel before he died, and doesn't really provide a lot of comfort for Saul, especially in what he's doing now. And so we see Saul just continuing to do bad decisions. Like he's just continuing to kind of do after his own thing. And we're seeing David is being a good leader and seems to be making good decisions and as that's going up. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll probably make our way into 2 Samuel a little bit today. But maybe not. We'll have to see. Did anyone want to add anything to the historical description that I just did?
I have a minor question though.
Yeah.
In those days, were seances and all this kind of stuff common?
I would say it's as common as we see today. And you go to different parts of the world and they become more common. You have other parts of the world become less common. Like you have people that are like seers and things like that. And so it says that they got rid of all of them, but they also knew right where this one was. Like that. That's so.
If somebody's told me I'm going to go to a seance here in the United States, I'd probably give it a funny look.
Yeah, but you could probably find it pretty quick too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Like it's
like palm readers.
Yeah, palm readers.
All of the little shops.
Maria, US one.
Yeah. Fortune tellers. Like there's a lot of things. Like I know I've seen a few. It's usually maybe on US 1, usually in a small house. Something like that. And so it's definitely still
one on US. Port St. Lucie Boulevard down there.
Yeah, Psychic Maria, I think it is.
Yeah. You guys know where this is really well. Saul should be talking to you guys. So I would say that it's still pretty common today. There's some kind of indications in the stories that we kind of read about it that the medium was kind of surprised that it was working as well as it was. So I think there's a lot of deceit in that field of work, and things like that. I'm not saying that there's nothing that cannot happen, but I do think there is a lot of deceit in that field. Just like there's a lot of deceit in a lot of fields. So like that's, but I think they're dealing with a lot of the same issues back then. But I think to the story and what the authors want you to hear is that Samuel's still on message. And so like I think the story wants us to see it as Samuel. And that, we can have all the discussions we want about whether it was or wasn't, but the story and the author wants us to see it as Samuel. And that even from the grave, Samuel is still on brand with how he's considering Saul. So were you familiar with that story? Yeah. Kyler knows a lot of stories like that. That's all these stuff. So, all right, let's begin reading here. We'll be chapter 29, and I did not get a pen, so I'll start the reading and then I'll go grab a pencil. So let's see here. Oh, hold on. Before I do that, I got to make sure I got my right. There it is. There it is. Okay. So go back to Zoom and then hit share screen. Hit this. Optimize for video. Share. Okay. Here we go.
Then the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by a fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and by thousands. But David and his men passed in review at the rear with Achish. Then the princes of the Philistines said,
"What are these Hebrews doing here?"
And Achish said to the princes of the Philistines,
Is this not David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me these days or these years? And to this day, I have found no fault in him since he defected to me.
But the princes of the Philistines were angry with him. So the princes of the Philistines said to him,
"Make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place which you have appointed for him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become our adversary. For with what could he reconcile himself to his master, if not with the heads of these men? Is this not David, of whom they sang to one another in dances, saying, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s?'"
Then Achish called David and said to him,
Surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and your going out and your coming in with me in the army is good in my sight. For to this day I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me. Nevertheless, the lords do not favor you. Therefore return now and go in peace, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines.
But what have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant as long as I have been with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?
I know that you are as good in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the princes of the Philistines have said, He shall not go up with us to the battle. Now therefore, rise early in the morning with your master's servants who have come with you. And as soon as you are up early in the morning and have light, depart.
So David and his men rose early to depart in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel.
Okay. Oh, hold on.
Now it happened.
There we go. Okay. So what did you kind of see there? It seems like we're getting set up for some stuff, but like that's what would you notice?
The word trust
The word trust?
stood out to me. It's not in there, but I felt it all the way through.
Oh, okay. Now, what do you mean? Like, how did you feel it? Like, what was going on that you
Well,
felt
the
it?
Philistines didn't necessarily trust Achish,
Yeah.
who trusted that David was doing everything he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And he even mentioned it to them. So they said, they didn't really trust him.
Yeah. And we see that, like as you know, if we remember back last week, we were talking about David was making these promises, and you know, he's actually kind of looting these other towns. And he's like, yeah, they're just small, like, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, type of thing, and like, so he's kind of, and that was Achish, right? That he was talking with, yeah. Like, so that's because of that meeting beforehand. I have not really read this stuff yet, so like that's.
I kind of felt like, you know, David did not want to fight his own people, the Israelis. So he was dodging in these little towns, like you said.
Yeah.
And now he's going face to face with him.
Yeah.
Good excuse. Send me home.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's almost like they were calling his bluff,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a way out,
Yeah.
So I wonder too, like you're talking like with Achish, is he just like a little dim, the other lords like saw David and it's like, hey, this is the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
How could you trust him?
Yeah. How can you trust him here?
You take verse 8, and where David answers that I may not go fight against the enemies of my Lord. Was he referring to Saul, or was he referring to Achish?
Oh, like, let's see.
Double thought.
Yeah. Let's see.
A little generic term there.
Yeah, you kind of left that one up in the air there.
Yeah, the enemies of my Lord, the King. Well, and it's interesting, like for those of you that have the Jewish Bibles, and because the New King James, Lord is lowercase, which is like but I don't feel like it's worth looking up in the Hebrew, but it would be the lowercase Lord. But is he talking about God? Is he talking about his own people? Like that's, and right before that, you have this. This is David, who everyone sings about him. How Saul, kills his thousands, but David kills his 10,000s. Like they're like, hey, pay attention to this dude. Like that's. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing to you right now, to this Achish. So
One calls him a mercenary.
yeah, mercenary. Yeah, and so that's Anything else before we go to 30? There's a lot of setup in this one. All right, let's go on to 30. Here we go.
Now it happened, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept, until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son,
Please, bring the ephod here to me.
And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord,
Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?
Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all.
So David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 stayed behind, who were so weary that they could not cross the brook Besor. Then they found an Egyptian in the field, and brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate, and they let him drink water. And they gave him a piece of a cake of figs, and 2 clusters of raisins. So when he had eaten, his strength came back to him. For he had eaten no bread, nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him,
To whom do you belong, and where are you from?
I am a young man from Egypt, servant of an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because 3 days ago I fell sick. we made an invasion of the southern area of the Kerethites in the territory which belongs to Judah, and of the southern area of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire.
Can you take me down to this troop?
Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this troop.
And when he had brought him down, there they were, spread out over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. And David rescued his 2 wives. And nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil, or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. Then David took all the flocks and herds they had driven before those other livestock, and said,
This is David's spoil.
Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary that they could not follow David, whom they also had made to stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David, and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near the people, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said,
Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except for every man's wife and children, that they may lead them away and depart.
My brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us, and delivered into our hand the troop that came against us. For who will heed you in this matter? But as his part is who goes down to the battle, so shall his part be who stays by the supplies. They shall share alike.
So it was from that day forward. He made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel to this day. Now when David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying,
Here is a present for you, from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord.
To those who were in Bethel, those who were in Ramoth of the south, those who were in Jeter, those who were in Aroer, those who were in Siphmath, those who were in Eshtemoa, those who were in Rachel, those who were in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, those who were in the cities of the Kenites, those who were in Hormah, those who were in Korashan, those who were in Athak, those who were in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to rove.
Okay.
Now the Philistine.
All right. So what stood out to you there? There's a lot going on in this one. There's a lot going on.
David asked God.
David asked God.
To put on the ephod.
Yeah, so he went and put on the ephod and asked God what is going on. So again, we're seeing that's something that Saul never really does like that. That's in fact, he tries to consult evil things. And then here's David doing the exact opposite to it.
So, with that, does God answer him? I mean, because we're used to praying, and
Yeah.
back then, God was in the tabernacle, and only one guy got to go in and talk to God.
Yeah.
Does God talk to David himself because they're his anointed?
I think so. So that's kind of, because you have the synagogues too. And so you have the temple that is like that center place of God's, like the hotspot of God's presence. But you also have like a greater collective spirituality. Like they would have understood it also to be like wherever the Torah is. Like if you have the Torah in your heart, that God is kind of living in your heart as well. And so I think kind of God being on the loose is kind of an idea that's there, even though like there's still a strong temple theology as well. Because I mean you see that with the way Samuel deals and what we see here and how God is interacting, and I think God interacting with David, I think the compiler of the story is really wanting to create a difference between David and Saul. Like that's like Saul is just doing whatever he wants whenever he wants, and David is being very intentional. And to go with that, there are some numbered events that happen. Did you notice those numbered events? Like there's one right on the first verse of 30. Like and David and his men came to Ziklag on the third. Yeah, that's in that third day, 3 days. That's a good. That's one of those good numbers. And we have some new people that are around here now. Like it's the way I view numbers in the Bible, that they're like emojis. Like so, you have like the heart emoji and the smiley face, and all those things. Those numbers are kind of like emojis. They're giving off like an idea that's happening there. So like 7 is a good. Like multiples of 10s are like great. So almost like exclamation points. And 3 is one of those good ones too. And there's a lot of 3s in this chapter. So like 6 isn't quite as good. It's incomplete, kind of incomplete creation type of ideas going on there. So you see the third day happening there, but you also see
the Egyptian slave. The
Egyptian slave. It says that he had not eaten bread or drank water for 3 days and 3 nights. So like that's, and so I think there's this the story coming out from here is telling us like, hey, this guy, yes, we know not eating or drinking for 3 days, 3 nights is physically not good for you, and you're going to be weak by that happening. But it's also, that's kind of an important number, and an important number, and so that God is involved in what is going on here, like that they just happened across this mistreated slave who got sick, and his master is like, nope, I don't need you anymore, and just cast him aside to die out in the wilderness, and abandon him, which you can see what he does because of it. But that's, I think that those numbers, I was like, oh, look at these numbers. This is interesting. It's kind of like this divine ordaining of what is happening here. Yeah.
There's a little fruit fly flying around you there.
I blame Kyler. So I don't know what else kind of stood out to you there. Like, was there anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So why in this case did the enemy forces come in and not kill everybody? Seems that we go through most of these fights and all the women and everybody gets killed, but they didn't kill him. They took him this time.
Okay, so they took the like what David does when he goes in there.
Well, when the bad guys go into his hometown, they burn the hometown down.
But they take it.
They take everything.
Yeah, and I understand taking the spoils, but most, all these ones that we've been reading, everybody gets killed.
Everyone gets killed. So I think when we go into their world, all right, and we have to go into their world, we have to remember what the world looked like, and like the righteousness that is found in like Joshua, where God's people, when they're taking over the promised land, that they are instructed to kill everybody, and they don't. Like that's a lot of times, and that's not viewed with righteousness. Now, that's a different standard than how we understand the world today, and that's fine. The important thing is to understand what is going on in their world. And so so there's definitely this system of like, are you going to go the whole way, or are you going to hedge? And I think you see them, and it could be, I'm not sure, I haven't thought about it too much, but even though they're enemies, they're kind of hedging a little bit, and that ends up kind of being their downfall a little bit. Like they're mistreating their slaves, like and they also are getting drunk off the spoil and like all that stuff. They just leave themselves wide open to David's attack.
Well, it talks about him celebrating afterwards with all that, and I think they were going, look what I have, David's stuff and his people's stuff.
Oh yeah, because that was definitely like a thing that would happen in those. I mean, that's part of the humiliation of war. I mean, it still is to this day, to a certain point. War is so much different now, but what would be the humiliation of war is like taking the spoils of war in all the ways that implied, where like having the celebration afterwards, that was part of the humiliation of those that you would conquer. And so they're doing that, but it's obviously a little too soon.
Didn't David, nobody would tell what he was doing?
Yeah, so does he kill everyone on this one? Does he do?
400 escaped on camels.
400 escaped on camels, which...
He only had 200 men. He killed everyone except 400, so it must have been a lot of other people.
Because there were some that weren't up to it.
So David did it, wasn't very small.
Yeah. And then those that ran away with the camels, and the camels are mentioned, now this is just my notes in the bottom, they were mentioned in chapter 15, and like a prized possession. So that's probably like, it's like, save the camels, and people run away, with that wealth.
So the people of Port St. Lucie, they take up in their sports cars.
Yeah, well, lifted trucks.
Well, yeah.
like that.
Think of it like a Humvee.
Yeah. Like that, lifted trucks. And so I think the important statement that is said there, and because it says it over and over again, like, yes, he rescues his wives, but he recovered everything that was taken from them. Like the story does not want us to miss that point about David.
Pastor? How I took it was the people were not killed because they were going to be taken as slaves. David, much like Moses, set them free.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good. So, and that aligns with, it's the Old Testament and the New Testament for in a certain regard is very anti-slavery. Like any time Israel's using indentured servants. Like when Solomon builds the temple, he uses slave labor to build the temple, and that's just like you're going back to Egypt, like that. We freed you from this. Why are you acting like the oppressor now? And so I think that's a good point, Lee. I think that's a good point.
Especially since the slave was Egyptian.
Yeah, the mistreated slave.
Or even in
Egyptian, yeah.
The slave 7 years, and then they had to.
Yeah. There's
forever.
Yeah, there was always like the whole system about it. Like you have the year of Jubilee.
Right.
It's like letting slaves go. Now they never participated in this because it's kind of a rock your world thing. But like debts are canceled. Like all that stuff. Like that was to be a core set to the Hebrew people, and it just. No, they never really lived in it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't set up that way. And so like that, so you start connecting that idea to the forgiveness that and all of that God is bringing, which comes to a culmination. We're talking about all these threes and stuff like that. It's easy to make the leap to Jesus dying and staying dead for 3 days and rising again. So like that's, you could see where that story is using a similar language to what we're seeing here with David. And so that it's all kind of connected. So like the fun thing about that is that if you imagine yourself being a Hebrew and you know these stories, like you've heard these stories from the time you were little, like that's, and then you hear about Jesus and using very similar language to how the prophets and the Bible talk about David. So you get this messianic idea going in, but also senses of like Caesar and all this big stuff, but where his victory and rescue over all the things that hold down is in a similar time frame. Like that's, you would connect it to these stories and these other things like that. So it's cool being able to make those connections. Now, I'm not saying that's like a hard connection, like, it's like a firm, frozen thing go in there, but it's all these kind of loose connections where it's like, oh, that's kind of fun to think about it in that way.
Yeah, I kind of associated the fact that they found this Egyptian slave from the Amalekites who was abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of said to me that the Amalekites didn't really care about their slaves at all.
No.
So they probably needed more.
Yeah.
He said a condition.
Yeah, no, he did set a condition.
Like they didn't give his name even, but he said, but.
Yeah. So they were kind of always on the look for new slaves because they're just using them up, and so that's a good.
Sorry about that.
No, that's a good thing to point it out. So David recovers everything that is his, even his wives. Which is important to the story, and then you look at what David did with all that spoil, and he sends it to his own people, and he sends it out to all these other places that are in there, which is shrewd.
Political payback.
Which is shrewd. Like that's like that. He is.
But it also showed us his compassion.
Yeah.
For what he did for the slave.
Yeah.
As well as what he did later.
Well, and that's what I mean by like the shrewd stuff. Like he is so far everything that Saul has been what Samuel's warning about a king would be. That the king would take everything from you, basically. Like the king would take your family and take all these things. That's what was that? That's the beginning of Samuel. First
second chapter.
Yeah. Second, third, fourth, somewhere around there. Like chapter is this warning, and Saul has been that. Well, we're seeing David now. He actually seems, rather than just glomming on everything for himself, he seems to be giving out. So he's living in this more ideal circumstance.
Maybe that's where spreading the wealth came from.
Yeah. And so like that's so we're kind of seeing that, and whenever, I know it gets tiring for us, but when it's listing all these cities or peoples or something like that, that's saying something about who it's going to. So yeah, that's good. That's good. Was there anything else in this chapter?
I thought it was interesting it mentioned the fear of stoning.
Oh yeah.
That made me think of a number of times in both the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Where was that fear of stoning? Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Line 6.
fearful of being stoned.
6. They
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So 6.
It's in verse 6.
And so he was, so like Okay, so what we see with that is, like, it looks like David has lost some things, and people may mutiny against him, and so he's like, do I need to go do this or not? And so I have a note in here, so it kind of reminds me of this, but we've constantly seen that what has gotten Saul in trouble has been his impulsiveness and just doing what's like, remember, like, David has been able to kill Saul twice now and didn't, and Saul's like, oh, you're my boy, like that's you're my boy. Like Saul's impulsive to whatever works for him in that moment, and we see that, like, the scriptures are being very like, that's not the sign of a good leader here. And you see David, even when he's up against the wall, he's like giving some thought on, like, how do we do this? So that leads us to 200 men had to be left behind, and he's going conquering, with this other set of guys. So, yeah.
But he also showed he was a good leader because he still shared the wealth with those 200 that didn't even go.
Yeah, he didn't leave them behind.
And set up
And all that became an ordinance.
Yeah. So that's good. We're seeing this ideal Messiah kind of being played out in David, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. Because Messiah means king, so this is like kind of David's role that he's playing. Now, what we're seeing the rise of David right now. We're going to get to his fall, like, and so just be ready for that. Like, it's like this is such a great. Like, it goes up, this is David's line, and it goes down. Like that. And we see him become less, composed and willing to work with people and all that. So yeah.
The Jewish Bible had a note too that the Amalekites should not have even existed. Because in chapter 15, God commands Saul to eliminate them.
Eliminate them.
And they don't. They keep the good stuff.
Backbite them.
Yeah. So again, David's correcting.
Yeah. And so that's that same idea that it's like an ethic of that like we see in Joshua. It's like you got to destroy them, and they're not. So good. All right, let's do 31. The last chapter of this book, at least. Here we go.
Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer,
"Draw your sword, and thrust me through with it, as these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me."
But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that same day. And when the men of Israel, who were on the other side of the valley, and those who were on the other side of the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled. And the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So it happened the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head, and stripped off his armor, and sent word throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim it in the temple of their idols and among the people. Then they put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth-shan. Now when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and traveled all night, and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. And they came to Jabesh, and burned them there. Then they took their bones, and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and fasted 7 days.
Okay. Well, there's the end of Saul. All right. So, all right, what stood out? What stood out to you? What's going on?
With the death of Saul's sons, there is no one to assume the throne from his household.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good example. Sorry, my battery's dying. There we go. No, I think that's a good example. That it lists specifically his sons and then does not relent from that idea. It keeps saying it. His sons and everyone associated with Saul all died that day. Like that's like you can tell that the compiler here is not wanting to give you any reason why Saul or anyone in his family can lay claim to the throne. Like that, you can tell that's pretty singular in purpose there, right? Like that's like that it is going over to David. So So what else did you see here?
Well, if all the men of Israel fled, does that mean they had no more respect for Saul and they didn't care what happened to him?
Well, like that was after he died, right? Was it at the beginning? Oh, they fled from before Philistines and fell slain.
Oh, they were killed.
Yeah. Like it looks like they weren't winning this battle. And, and basically the Philistines are chasing them. And like they're failing at this battle that we see. All right. So if we juxtapose this against the story we just read about David without even his full fighting force has this great victory. And we're not given really any details about this, but Saul, with the power of the country behind him, isn't able to win. I mean, it begins with, now the Philistines fought against Israel, the men of Israel fled. Things aren't going well from the very beginning there. And and you just kind of feel like that's just how kind of Saul goes. I think it's the last breath of Saul is the same word that I've been using for him the whole time, is impulsive. That as soon as he loses a little bit, like there's no courage there. I still didn't plug that in. You got to plug in both sides if you want it to charge.
It's true.
Yeah. There we go. That's at least that thing blinks. Like that's so like he gets wounded. An archer hits him, and he's wounded, and he's like, as soon as this happens, he's like, kill me now, like do it. And even his armor bearer won't do it. He's like, I'm not gonna kill the king. like that. I'm not gonna do that. Yeah. Like that's and so then he falls on his own sword, and then armor bearer dies. He's like, oh my goodness, they're gonna accuse me of this. And he kills himself, and then that ends with Saul and his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and all his men died together that same day.
And suicide is absolutely banned in Jewish law.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, so again, Saul is just he's impulsive,
Made me think of the captain going down with the ship.
Really brutal.
Is this kind of normal in all of the land? Or is it specifically for Saul?
Oh, the way he dies is kind of brutal. I think there was probably some normalization in it, but I do think there was some like graphic details for Saul, you know, and kind of just that he departed ugly type of thing. You know, like that's kind of.
I just can't see putting the sword out and falling on it.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
Yeah.
I mean, you might say that takes guts because
Yeah.
that would hurt.
Yeah. Well, and that's what they talk about, like with the impulsiveness of Saul. Like he sees that he's gonna.
Kind of common in that region
Yeah.
that they would do that.
Yeah. They didn't want to capture the kings alive. Yeah. Yeah. And so it definitely would have been common. And so like but it's definitely not, you know, the way this is presented is that it's not anything good. And you have this like little bit of right here at the end, like kind of a righteous contingent that went and grabbed the bodies basically and burned them. And
This refers to the fact that the Jabesh Gilead that rescued his body and his son's body were the first group saved by Saul in war.
oh, were
Chapter
they?
11.
Oh, chapter 11.
Refers to that, yeah.
Okay.
So that's why they were the ones that did that.
Okay. So they had a lot of strong feelings towards
But I
Saul.
thought the 7 days at the end was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. The 7 days.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Again, so you have, remember, like they're like, it's like emojis. So it's kind of like 7 kind of has a completeness to it, like 7 days of creation.
It is done.
Yeah, yeah. So like you have, like they fasted all of the days.
What is the significance of the fasting after?
I think it's like like a grieving, kind of a cleansing, type of things like that. Kind of part of it. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything more to it.
It's like respect, but we don't do that. We have a funeral dinner.
Yeah, funeral dinner. Yeah.
Same a funeral dinner.
It's a mourning period.
Yeah, mourning period.
They sit Shiva for 7 days. The mirrors are all covered with black cloths, and they're not supposed to cook. Friends, relatives bring food, etc. for them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So geography-wise, so the Philistines now are occupying Israel. David's in Judah. And those are, I mean, they're all Israelites, but it's two different places, right? I mean, so David still has like his, I mean, because that's Judah. Was it always considered separate from Israel?
Not always, but
At this time.
But at this time, that's something that really gets unified. We'll find out if it's unified under David. My geography memory isn't the best, but I know Solomon reigns over the United Kingdom. And then at the end of Solomon, the kings following him, it falls away again. And so like you have the northern and the southern and Judah and Israel. Like that's those ideas. But I know Solomon reigns, and I think David is what brings all that together, which kind of makes sense. Which how you can see this story moving and what's happening in it. And so like that's.
But even then, Saul was still king of Judah too, though, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Their king, right?
I think so. Well, and also like it's such, we're watching the transition from from iron to bronze. I think we're in the Bronze Age here. And so and when you look at Israel's history, you have Abraham, and Abraham is definitely nomadic, hunter-gatherer, thing that is going on. And as we continue going through, you have Egypt, which you notice how Egypt they keep talking about their chariots. Like Egypt probably was one of the first to have chariots. And so they keep talking about that, like, you know, it's like whoever has the biggest guns wins type of thing. And you get into the Philistines and they start talking about like armor a lot, and you know, all of these things. Those are all trademarks of like the Bronze Age and how they're able to work with metals and, you know, and all those things. So as those ages came, these groups of people became less nomadic and started having more towns and more collective governments. And so, you know, we're seeing that collective government type of thing like happen kind of in front of us. So there's probably some messiness with Judah and all those others where they kind of see themselves as autonomous, but also being kind of from the same grouping as from Abraham. And I have a feeling that plays into the future. I don't know if anything I just said made sense, but that's in a general sense, you have just that world history knowledge that we have is playing out all around here. You know, they're not just having, oh, this is just how it is. You know, you have these cycles as they move into them, and how the kings rule and all of that is happening at the same time. So that's, yeah. I don't know, let's see, it's 54. So what's going on with this? What's going on here? Maybe we should just go ahead and call it, because I have a feeling all this is connected, and that all of that. So I don't know, were there any other ideas about Saul, anything that kind of stood out to you as we have finished 1 Samuel now?
Yeah, they wanted a king because they probably wanted public works and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Somebody to build a bridge. You know.
Yeah.
And they forgot about the other stuff that goes with having a king.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's going to tell you what to do.
And so like what I just said, and Fred just reminded me of this, what I just said about all of this moving from hunter-gatherer to this more collectivist sense of having kings. And, you know, we kind of look like why would they want a king? You know, like why? And well, it would have been kind of the new thing, or the newer, you know, stuff just moved slow back then. But it would have been that newer thing. It's like, oh yeah, we want this too, like what everyone else has. And so like it's when you see that, you're like, okay, like, because it's easy to look at them and like, oh, these people were foolish. They should have been asking for democracy, you know, or something like that, you know. But you look at it through that lens, and it's like, oh yeah, I could easily see where I could fall into the same thing as these people, you know, like that's, and when you're able to get that empathy, then I think that's where the story wants you, and to see that there's something bigger than what is saving yourself, you know,
they only had people coming from one village, one country to another, telling them what's happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't watch the evening news and say, oh boy, Amalekites are having problems over there.
Yeah.
Well, there is one more son.
Yeah, there is another son.
Yeah.
So when you read this, it kind of says, you know, his sons, but I look back and it doesn't say all his sons, just the ones that went to war.
Yeah.
I wonder why the other boy didn't go to war.
I don't know. Maybe he's a little bit like his dad.
He was too young.
Too young. Yeah. So I don't know much about it. Like that's.
It gets into it in 2 Samuel. By chapter 2.
Right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be ready for that next week. And so as we continue but that's good pointing.
I got chapter 1 but not 2 yet.
That's good pointing all that stuff out. So it's But yeah, so that's cool. That's cool. For everyone watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us today.